If I could invite at this time our panel to come up to the front, and then I'd like to introduce them. First of all, can we give a round of applause for an awesome-looking panel? And what a delightful panel. I had the opportunity to, engage in conversation with many of them last night and to learn more about their work, so we're in for a treat. We posed to the panel the broad-based question that this really is the overview, I think, of the ideas that we're going to hear over the next while. But how can we think about the work of librarians and library staff to more effectively support the academic mission? And when I say support, I mean enhance. I mean act out and take actions that make a difference in terms of the academic mission. And we've posed a range of questions that I'll share in a moment, but that's the overarching broad-based goal of the panel. So I'd like to start with, on my far right, your left, Odile Harter, who is a research librarian at Harvard University and in the Faculty of Arts and Science. She is a Faculty of Arts and Science alum. So she brings that real important user perspective as a fairly recent graduate as well. So a very important perspective. I'm going to go to Chris next, and Professor Chris Dede is the Timothy E. Wirth Professor in Learning Technology. Sorry, do I have Chris next? Yes. Yeah. School of Education. Chris, welcome. So nice to have you here. Next is Dr. Ian Lapp, Associate Dean for Strategic Educational Initiatives and a lecturer on global health. So again, thank you so much, Ian, for joining us. Next, I have Kristin Lofblad Sullivan, Program Director, Teaching and Learning Technologies, and the Harvard University Information Technology role. So thank you very much, Kristin. And last but not least, Stephen Baker, who's the president of the Baker Design Group. So we've got a range of perspectives and ideas that will be brought forth in the panel today. There again is the overall list of our folks. And these are the broad-based questions that we posed as literally just to get them thinking about the ideas that they wanted to share with you today. So thinking about the opportunities, what are the opportunities as we support the academic mission? And some of those might be the opportunities really that take us forward into the future. The challenges or barriers that sometimes create those issues that we need to problem solve around. What are they as we think about integration? Importantly, what are some of the broader principles that should guide our work? And again, our thanks to Peggy, who began generating some of those important broader principles that guide us in the thinking about our work. And then any good ideas, effective practices that these folks feel have made a difference. So with that, we're going to start. Chris, I believe that you were going to get us going to begin. So Chris, if I could welcome you. And again, we've given each panelist, I'll say just a rough, 5 or so minutes to pose some provocative and introductory ideas. And then after they've all done that, we'll open it up to the panel for a broader discussion. So Chris?
Well, I want to pose an interesting challenge and opportunity for libraries in the academic mission, and in order to frame that, I'm going to use an analogy to news organizations. Now, news organizations are certainly not libraries, but they do deal with data and information, perhaps not knowledge, and when news is done well, whether it is print or television or some other sources, it is a way that draws people towards knowledge as they get intrigued by things that are happening in the world around them. But news organizations of every type are facing a huge challenge now because their financial model has collapsed. And it's collapsed because people are increasingly no longer getting their news from journalists or validated news sources. They're getting their news from each other. They're getting their news through social media. So they've disintermediated journalism as a vehicle for getting their data and information. Whether this is good or bad, it's posing enormous problems for even the best of the news organizations. And it's been interesting to look at the ways that the Fourth Estate has attempted to respond to this. In particular, The Guardian in London, which is certainly a major newspaper, developed a commercial that I found quite interesting. I don't know whether my interpretation of the commercial was in their minds when they made it, but I'm going to frame the commercial in a particular way for you. We can think of validated journalism as a kind of top-down knowledge, and we can think of social media as a kind of bottom-up sharing of experience and attempting to make meaning together and taking different kinds of ethical perspectives as people interact with one another. So the Guardian's commercial was an attempt to fuse those two in the context of a particular news story that is probably familiar to you. So Carol, would you go ahead and show the video?
Okay. There we go. Yes, we will, Chris. And talk amongst yourselves for a minute. Okay, there we go.
Little pig, let us in! It's a police! Move!
The third little pig is now being taken into custody, so the spotlight is once again shone on the grey area of homeowners' rights to protect their properties.
This isn't right. The three little pigs are the victims.
Blew down 2 houses. We got what he deserved.
But the pigs went too far.
You have every right to defend your property.
Pénétrer chez quelqu'un.
Kick the chinny chin chins up, fellas.
Boiling someone alive hardly constitutes reasonable
Somebody is
force.
going to break the law and intrude on
You
you.
can't protect yourself in your own home.
A man's home is his castle.
If someone tried to blow my house down, I'd do the same.
I knew the wolf. There's no way he could have blown down those houses. He had asthma.
The wolf had asthma. So what's the truth about the pigs' houses being blown down? Inside job.
There's no reason why those 2 houses, one made from straw, the other from wood, should have collapsed. Not even a healthy wolf's huff and puff could bring them down.
The 3 little pigs have confessed to conspiring to commit insurance fraud, framing the wolf in an attempt to cover their tracks. Their motive was financial, as they struggled to keep up with their mortgage repayments.
Guilty. I can empathise with the
I'm
pigs.
behind on my payments too.
How could this have happened?
I've lost everything.
Now, it is interesting that a major newspaper like The Guardian is producing commercials like this as a way, again, of trying to justify its existence. But I think that there's an interesting parallel here, because when I watched this, I thought about the difference between the Encyclopedia Britannica and Wikipedia, which, of course, is a major debate within education about what kinds of sources people should be using. Because the Encyclopedia Britannica articles, as you know, are written largely by people like me, and they represent a kind of top-down perspective on validated knowledge. And Wikipedia is much more bottom-up and kind of like the perspective-taking and the anecdotal interaction that you see with the Three Little Pigs. And of course, there are many sources through social media to which people turn not simply for information and data, but for knowledge that have a very informal flavor to them. My younger daughter is 14. We adopted her from India, and I watch her do her homework. And of course, she references the textbook and the encyclopedia and Wikipedia and various websites, and her friends are doing Snapchat with her at the same time, sharing their opinions and their insights. And of course, they're doing what we do as adults. They're having to make meaning out of sources that are incomplete, inconsistent, biased, inaccurate, partially accurate, fully accurate, and they're trying to make sense out of all that. So I think the interesting challenge for libraries is that increasingly I see people doing the same thing with knowledge as they're doing with data and information, even here at Harvard. And I think there's a challenge if we find the balance shifting away from top-down validated knowledge to kind of bottom-up experience sharing. But I think there's also an opportunity because each has a strength that the other lacks. So I wonder how libraries could configure to be the place on campus that you go to be at the edge between those two kinds of epistemology. So that's my 5-minute provocation.
Thank you very much, Chris, and a great provocative start and looking at both challenges and opportunities together. Kristin, if we could invite you as our second speaker.
Sure. No one wants to go after Dede, so I have no video to show and possibly no big ideas. I wanted to start just by contextualizing what I'm doing at Harvard now and what I'd been doing previous to the work I'm doing now and how it relates to libraries. So as Carol mentioned, I'm the program director for the Teaching and Learning Technologies program. This is a specially funded, time-bound transformation initiative to help the university offer a continually evolving set of technologies to support teaching and learning across the schools, to facilitate pedagogical innovation, and to support research on learning. So the big areas that we're going to be doing for the next 2 years include migrating legacy learning management systems, there's 4, welcome to Harvard, to a single LMS, Canvas, and open source learning management system, and also enabling faculty to respond to their own teaching and learning needs through helping with developing pedagogical components to extend the functionality of that platform to meet their learning needs. We're also developing the capacity to extract raw data that we can extract from the course websites in support of educational research, much in the same way that we're doing with edX. And so we have a lot of work to do in 2 years. We're not doing it alone, and we're hoping to meet our goals through collaborations and partnerships. 2 ways that we are working on these collaborations and partnerships, one of which involves creating a developer community at Harvard, so all the people who have been developing pedagogical tools for faculty in pockets around the university can begin to work together and build things in a similar way and share what they're doing with each other. And we're doing similar work on building a teaching and learning community. So we've been at this for about a year. We've got a couple more years to go, so some of my remarks today may relate to that, but I also want to mention that previous to this work, I was at the Ed School for 8 years running the academic technology team, and I'm fortunate to have these dual experiences at Harvard because right now I'm in this, Harvard's sort of centralized, sort of decentralized, and the work that TLT is doing is a central initiative that is in support of all the school's work. And previous to this at the Ed School, I was at a small school a little school, 3 buildings, knew everybody. And so it was much more informal. And in my partnership with the libraries, with Deb Garson and others, it was just a matter of running down the stairs and being like, what are you up to? What do you need help with? This is what I need help with. So some of my remarks today may reflect those dual experiences here at Harvard. So the question that Carol posed to us was about what opportunities do we have to support the academic mission of a university? What are the challenges, and what are some principles that we could apply in getting past those challenges to better meet the opportunities? When I think about where we are today, in my space of academic technology, I'm really grateful for the MOOC phenomenon that's happened for the last couple years, because one of the biggest things that I've noticed, and it's clearly apparent, it's invited faculty to reimagine how they teach, and to reimagine how they teach through the use of technology, and that's really exciting. The use of technology in teaching has been going on for a really long time. I've been doing this work for 15 years, and I'm sure it was happening before I even got in this game. But through the shining the light on this MOOC phenomenon, faculty are bringing fresh ideas to their residential teaching as well, and that's very exciting. So how can we leverage that in our support of faculty? So the opportunity is people are keen on working on teaching and learning again. At the Ed School, I was fortunate that faculty always were thinking about teaching and learning. It wasn't a foreign subject to talk about teaching. I think that that's not the case at every school with every discipline. And so how can we help leverage technology to help more faculty think innovatively about their teaching and learning? So I think the opportunities that are in academic technology are also the opportunities that are in the research, teaching, and learning library environment. So then I think, what are the challenges with this? That seems like a modest proposal, right? There's sort of two challenges that I think about. One is the project management challenge, right? Money, time, and resources. How are we going to find the time, find the money, find the resources to meet the needs of the faculty? So we're psyched that people have big ideas, and how are we going to meet those big ideas? The other one is fighting the past. How things used to be done is not the way that things will be done in the future, and we heard about that a bit today in terms of the library space and how people use libraries. I think of that too with technology, or the relationship between academic technologists and the faculty that they support. So, and I think of that, it must be true as well with librarians. We are no longer an afterthought. We are a partner. It's better to work with us from the beginning instead of at the end. So how do we break through or overcome some of those habits of the past where we may have been viewed more as a support channel instead of a partnership channel? So that's a big thing that's front of mind all the time. And I'll just close with a comment that I made at the beginning about how is TLT going to meet our ambitious goals here at this awesome broad university in 2 years. And I mentioned partnerships and collaboration. And I think really none of us is as smart as all of us. We need to work together, and we have to figure that out. I mean, at the Ed School, it was easier because there was one flight of stairs between this group and this group. And so in that way, it was nice. But the world isn't always built the way that the Ed School is, with just 3 buildings and just a few floors. How do we find the right pockets to collaborate with? Who do we partner with? How do we put the right ideas first? And how do we help the people that we're supporting see us in the way that we see ourselves? Thanks.
Thank you. So I already have 2 pages of notes. This is great, some wonderful ideas. Thank you so much, Kristin. And we go next to Stephen Baker. So Stephen.
Good morning. So as you may have heard, I'm the president of Baker Design Group. So I'm an architect, but I'm also an interior designer, and I'm also an industrial designer. And I had actually the pleasure of actually helping the Ed School transform Gutman Library into, basically remove the grandmother portion and inject a soul, if you will. And so I hope you all get a chance to see that. But so to give you an idea of how architecture, interior design, and industrial design combine, I need to tell you a little story of a conference like this that I attended. You have to cross-pollinate a lot of interesting ideas and things. And so I had gone to the IBM Pervasive Computing Conference about 15 years ago as an act of immersing myself into their world. And then that horrible thing happens where you go to the luncheon and you get you go, oh, I'm in table 4, all right. And so you go there and you look around and go, head of design Sony, head of design Toshiba, head of design whatever. And you thought, oh, please, let's not introduce ourselves and tell everyone what we do. Sure enough, they went around, and he got to me and I go, well, I'm an architect. And of course, the table burst out in laughter. You're at the wrong conference. And I said, well, okay, hold on. You designed these, right? And they go, yeah. Beautiful, intuitive to use, make knowledge at your fingertips, and ease of collaboration with friends, colleagues, and people in the world. I go, yeah. I go, I make these big enough to walk into. And so that's really what libraries are becoming. Okay, and so design is really all about basically problem solving, and our key when we can do it successfully is to listen to what your ambitions are, then look to see whether your actions are aligned with your ambitions. Okay, and then leveraging existing assets. Not all of us have all the money we'd love to have for projects. Sometimes there are old buildings, sometimes there are new buildings. Okay, and so we have to remove the obstacles. And how libraries, I think, could actually help the academic mission is there is this dilemma where the technology is actually allowing for you to reduce the amount of square footage that you actually need to store the resources that you had. The unique thing that you have, if you have an existing building, is that you've got a structure that's actually been designed or engineered to carry very heavy weights. Usually has very high ceiling heights. People would kill for that kind of feature in a vacant space for labs, maker spaces, additional classrooms and things. And the same thing goes for new libraries, that they both need to embrace change. And one of the things I've seen is that we have schools that are well-funded and schools that are not so well-funded. And if libraries could actually be the sort of central source for gaining access to technologies and experimental teaching techniques, and that the lesser funded schools or departments could have access to, I think you'd wind up actually having it be almost like a technology test kitchen. And that's really what I'm hoping that we can help people that are looking at libraries do. And it's basically allowing libraries to host or foster an academic environment that's in support of lifelong learning for not only the faculty, but the students, the administration, basically a hub of intellectual engagement.
Great. Thank you very much, Stephen. And last but not least, Odile.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Ian. No, okay. How could I forget you? Ian, you're next.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Ian.
Sure. I thought I might go last, but
almost. You almost got the.
So a lot of great ideas have been put forward, from multimedia to newfangled technology to design concepts. So I'll just go straight to pandering. When I grow up, I want to be a librarian. And I really truly do love librarians, and I'm just not pandering. I've been in public health for 14 years, 4 years here at Harvard, and 10 years prior to that for 10 years at Columbia University. And when I first joined Columbia, they didn't have any space for my office, and I actually spent my first year at Columbia on Librarians Row, because the library was right next to the School of Public Health. And so I got a firsthand experience of what it's like to have your workday interrupted regularly by knocks on the door with inquiries and the like. So I've always had a deep appreciation for librarians. I wasn't pandering. I at different points actually thought about doing the work of being a librarian. Because what's exciting about public health is also, I think, exciting about the work that all of you do. And that's about the idea here of not only being an information source, a repository of information, but taking information and creating knowledge and having an impact. And I see a real synergistic role for the libraries of the 21st century that goes hand in hand with public health education. When I joined Columbia in June of 2001, I, as well as all of you, didn't know what would happen on September 11th, 2001 in New York City. Out of that tragedy, in many ways, public health was put first and foremost. Words like epidemiology became part of the vocabulary after the disaster and then anthrax, which played itself out. And people turned to public health for education, but they also turned to the libraries as information. And you're seeing this transpire again this fall, where Ebola has become a source of concern for many people, and people turn to various different resources. And picking up on Chris's opening remarks, what's interesting is how we think about information. So when you mentioned Wikipedia, I was reminded by the New York Times article around a week and a half ago, where after the CDC, that's the Centers for Disease Control, and the WHO, the World Health Organization, the third most visited site on the web was the Ebola page for Wikipedia. And so this changing definition of what sources of knowledge and where things play out is quite critical. One of the big challenges that I think that public health faces, and I think libraries, is interdisciplinarity. And I say it as a challenge, but it's something that I think we all embrace. What I observed at Columbia and I observe here is that two great library systems have a challenge in serving public health because our works are in the medical library, but so too are our works in the social science library, as well as the natural science library. And as more and more of higher ed becomes interdisciplinary and the need for integration, I think public health as well as the libraries need to rise to that challenge. They need to be more than places where information and people meet, but where information and people come together to create new knowledge, as well as at the forefront to have an impact, to change people's lives, to give them more than news that they can use, but give them ideas that can change behaviors, change lives, change societies. And the way that happens is by both leveraging, as Kristin made reference to, thinking about new ways that we manage information, how we think about technology. As Stephen pointed to, this idea here of what is effective design. And we often, as Stephen could speak more eloquently, think about design as what is the user experience? How are they going to experience that building or that library that Stephen designs? And so if public health is about changing people's lives, and in public health, different from medicine, we think about changing lives millions at a time, whether it be through immunization or diabetes prevention programs, et cetera. Libraries have that same power at universities and beyond. And I think that libraries and librarians, public health and public health academics and professionals should think about this partnership for transformation, starting from the education of the next generation of public health leaders. And you can plug in the blank for whether it be education or business or this building law. How do we hand in hand think about creating knowledge navigators? One of the things I talked to some folks in preparation for this is that one of the core competencies that I don't see in most of our graduates, and I didn't see it at Columbia, is the ability to grapple with the legitimacy of data, the proper sourcing, how to actually know how to use PubMed and other databases effectively. For most academics, they don't see that as critical competencies for a master's level graduate, but I do. And I think that as you engage with your partners, whether it be public health or the other professional schools, playing a role in how we create knowledge navigators and think about the competencies, the library competencies, for a lack of a better word right now, that all graduates should have at the professional level, let alone the undergraduate and doctoral level, I think is quite critical and a huge opportunity. So in closing, thinking about the library not as a building, not as a website, thinking about this idea here that it is of the university and for the university, and in some cases leading the university, positions the library as change agents for our university, but change agents for our community and beyond. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you very much. Ian, thank you so much. And Odile, over to you.
All right, so I'm coming at this from the perspective of a librarian. Like most of you, I spend a lot of my day face-to-face with researchers who are grappling with our systems and trying to extract from the system something they can use for their work. And also, as Carol mentioned, the perspective of a researcher trying to take that material and bring it back to my discipline as new knowledge in some way. And I'll be quite concrete and focus on challenges, because I think everything sort of flows from challenges. So the biggest challenge we face is that our systems are really complicated. As complicated as we imagine they are, they're more complicated to the average researcher. And unfortunately, we live in a world where a lot of courses and a lot of disciplines allow some inexpert searching on JSTOR and Google Scholar and some investigation of your social network, calling in experts, to be okay, to be enough, to be sufficient. And so that's just a really huge challenge. It's also an opportunity, because what better material than our vast and complex library systems, which can't necessarily be simplified because they are so rich and varied that they don't slot into a really slick interface necessarily. What better material from which to teach the importance of independent inquiry and of critical thinking and critical consideration, the kinds of things that Ian was talking about. And as we think about doing that, accomplishing that mission, I think it's important to think very hard about the ratio of research effort to research reward. And so on the research effort side, just acknowledging how much time it takes and acknowledging the degree to which, and this is something I keep forgetting and then being reminded of in studies, sort of published studies done at Harvard, just kind of informal anecdotal information that I see, that generations who are growing up with full text search find indexed search to be an increasingly big cognitive hurdle. The effort required to actually learn how PsycInfo is searched is huge, and we need to acknowledge that as we think about how to sort of leverage what we do. And in terms of research reward, thinking in terms of how much syllabuses, how much the student's experience is going to be rewarded. How can we frame that reward either in our conversations with faculty? So, for example, I was talking with an instructor recently who was complaining about syllabus syndrome. He was absolutely appalled that his students would read only what was assigned on the syllabus, and it never occurred to them that it might be their responsibility to go to the library and do a little extra research to contextualize what they were reading in the syllabus. And he asked me for a solution. And I said, well, you need to remove one of your readings every week and put in a slot that says article or piece of scholarship found yourself, and to build in some kind of assessment of the research strategy used to find that material. So really talking with faculty about putting the time front and center and acknowledging that in their syllabuses, and also for us, thinking about reward in terms of lifetime impact. I think this is one of the things I struggle with the most, is that a lot of the systems that I teach are systems that these researchers will never use again after they leave college. They're not going to use the MLA bibliography again, let's be honest. But it's complicated enough that it's hard to teach it enough that they can use it, while at the same time keeping in view the kinds of transferable skills that the effort put into learning how this system works, they can extrapolate to the many complicated systems that they're going to encounter in their lives. And I think I just have to keep coming back to this. Is basic good pedagogy, but it's really important to keep coming back to it, to thinking about how can I express this in terms that are going to be useful to these students throughout their lives? How can I spend a lot of time talking about reading and analyzing a results list? Demonstrate failed searches and how to recover from them. Demonstrate how to figure out how a system works instead of just explaining how this particular system works. And so I want to touch on two kind of corollary things that I think we can do going forward, and they involve involving ourselves in our researchers' information management and involving them in our information management. So I think there's a huge opportunity to leverage the expertise that exists in libraries for metadata creation and management, and offering advisory services to researchers who are increasingly grappling with information overload and just have these huge hard drives full of stuff that they don't quite know how to organize, to go in and just have a conversation with them about how to think about organizing it. And in the same way, inviting researchers to be involved in indexing our material and in influencing our ontologies. So I think linked data, that environment allows for the addition of lots of synonyms generated by researchers without disrupting the very carefully structured ontology that the library world has come up with to catalog and index material. And crowdsourcing allows that sort of easy collection of that kind of material. So low-hanging fruit might be something like an open access repository, really encouraging researchers as they're depositing their own material into, say, Harvard's Dash, to think about the keywords they attach to it. I went and looked at the Dash keywords last night, and boy, it's clearly just machine generated from user inputs without any kind of mediation, and I don't know that Dash encourages users to go back and revise those keywords, but what an opportunity there. And it does take staff time and expertise to go back and forth between what users put in and how we can connect that in a very structured way to our indexing practices. So open access repository, citation management tools, maybe we could get involved in leveraging those in some way to really collect this information. Even an overlay on the catalog, allowing researchers to just kind of type in what they think this thing is about. Those are all sort of methods that might offer that possibility, but the more we get researchers involved in thinking about how the information is structured and working on structuring information themselves, the less complicated the systems will seem and the more reward they'll find from navigating them.
Well, thank you very much to our panel for those opening comments. In a few moments, I'm going to invite them literally to have a conversation together around the ideas that they've just shared, and to set you up for, after that dialogue, you're going to have the opportunity to have a conversation at your table and to share some of the ideas you've heard, but also to generate some questions from your conversation that will be fed back to the panel. You will see at your table, there's just a note-taking sheet here, and you may have jotted down some key ideas from the panelists already, and some connections that you've been making. But if over this next period of time, as you're hearing the panel continue these ideas, if you can be jotting down some ideas, what are the implications of these ideas in terms of your own work? And setting yourself up to have that conversation in the group, some of the key ideas you've heard, and the implications, and then we'll set you up for the subsequent generating of some questions. So with that, I'm going to invite the panel to begin the conversation. If I might start with a question. I heard a few themes that emerged from across the opening comments. So the notion of transferable skills and the importance of those, and are they changing from what the transferable skills have been in the past? The importance of interdisciplinarity, and in a way, what does that look like as we engage in it? We use the term collaboration a lot, and the importance of it. But what are the ways we actually find those pockets, as Kristin talked about, of collaboration? How do we generate them? What are concrete strategies for moving that forward? And partnership for transformation was another theme. Again, I'd love to hear some ideas of how we grapple with those in a very concrete sort of way as well. Those are some thoughts I had to get us going, but if I could invite the panel to begin the conversation in whatever direction you'd like.
I'll take a step,
Sure.
helping you out to get
Kristin.
started.
Mm-hmm. Wait time is very important in teaching, right? Give them time to think.
I'll start with a challenge that we have in TLT and something that's always front of mind and so important. You heard me mention it twice, and I'm going to bring it up again about collaborations and partnerships. And so in the work that we're doing with TLT, it's a lot about, and I'm going to focus less on the developer community, but more on the teaching and learning community that we're working with. So how are we keeping the work that we're doing in strategic lockstep with the teaching and learning initiatives of the university? So I think we all work really hard, and we all have witnessed others working really hard. Equally important is to work really smart. And so during this period with teaching and learning technologies, it's really essential that that we're not just working hard and encouraging the schools to work hard, but to work smart so that we're working on the right things. And so some of the ways I'll share with you, and I invite feedback and ideas, because we will never finish working on this and we'll never get it completely right. But if it's our desire to support pedagogical innovation at Harvard, what are some of the ways that we're tackling that? So one, through our program's governance, we have one of the co-chairs is the CIO, and the other co-chair is the Vice Provost for Advances in Learning. So right there, immediately from the very beginning, we have the pedagogy side and the technology side are guiding our steps to make sure that we're moving forward. Another area where we're very much checking in is with our teaching and learning initiative neighbors. So that might come in the form of Harvard X, whose charge is to help faculty plan, design, and develop and deliver non-traditional learning experiences right now, primarily on the edX platform, but in general. So how are we supporting the work that they're trying to do? How are our technology and our extraction of raw data to support their research committee, are we working together well? Another area is around Harvard's Initiative for Learning and Teaching, HILT. What are they trying to accomplish with the faculty community across the schools, and how can TLT support that? So we're staying in connection with that. In regards to the schools and the concrete goals we have around the Canvas migration and extensibility, interoperability, blah, 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 the parts that I mentioned earlier, how are we making sure that we are meeting the needs of the schools, and how are we making sure that we're hearing from the schools? So there's a lot of collaboration and partnership there. There's at the CIO level, there's at the academic technology leadership level, there's at the people that actually are sitting with the TF level. And so a lot of ongoing conversations. How do these conversations happen? They're happening one-on-one, time-consuming, major university, big. They're happening in groups. They're seeking out Susan Fliss and her organization of the Research, Teaching, and Learning Librarians and saying, how can TLT and RTL work together? And it never stops. There's never enough time to figure out how to best work together. But it's so important that it's always on the front of our mind. So if anybody, I'll be here after, or it might result in a question or a conversation that we could have on the board, but I'd love to get ideas from others.
Great, thank you.
Well, I can build on that a little from the teaching and learning perspective and talk about changes I've seen at the Ed School as a faculty member over the last few years. I think that there's a lot more emphasis on group projects, and often I get complaints from students about that, actually, that they're in a course that requires group projects and they don't like working in a group, and often they have some pretty good reasons for why they don't like it. But the reason I think that we're seeing more and more emphasis in teaching on group work is that's what they're facing in life, whether they want to be designers or whether they want to be leaders, whether they want to be teachers, whether they want to be entrepreneurs. the full range of what our students come in with, they have to leave with skills at being part of a group, whether as the leader or the follower. And so one of the big good things about the change in Gutman Library is that with those assignments for more and more group work, students had no place to meet in their groups. And the repurposing of space has led to very intense use of that space, because that's where students go to do their group work when they're not doing it virtually. Now, what's interesting to me is that I was in North Carolina I do a lot of work down there, and on one of my trips I went to the new Governor Hunt Library on the campus of North Carolina State. This library for a governor is actually bigger and much fancier than most of the presidential libraries. It is an unbelievable building, and you can get some sense of it online because they've tried to document what's going on. And the interesting thing about the spaces there is that they are very much centered around group work, but they have a lot of surfaces that surround these group settings that allow for representation, that allow for visualization, that allow for drawing in archives and putting them at your fingertips, so that you're not just getting sharing of knowledge from within the group. You've got the ability to call in the sort of top-down knowledge from the outside, which is also something that we're seeing, at least in high-end workspaces. So I think there is this interesting challenge of how we create something that isn't simply a cafe, to echo something that the keynote speaker said, that goes beyond being a cafe-like space and makes it special, that this is a group place in the library that's different than any other kind of group place that people can go.
Thank you very much, Chris. And interesting making the connection there to the evolving pedagogies that we're using in order to develop the kinds of competencies that are important for our graduates. But I want to raise maybe a controversial point on this. So again, background, cooperative and collaborative learning is a bit of an important part of my own research life as well. What I see is if we're using poorly designed group work, our students aren't developing the competencies, and we're turning them off of that experience. And so what are we doing to bring to bear the best evidence on what makes for effective group work, cooperative, collaborative learning, and supporting our faculty in the design that enables that? And that design oftentimes means, if I'm teaching at the University of Toronto in a class of 1,800, I'm using some really effective technologies to help support that process, where we can do peer assessment and give each other feedback on the kinds of work we're using. But we need to be working with our technology support, the resources that are available for students, and working with our librarians and thinking about the design of these assignments so that they are rich, full, and effective. And I think that's a challenge. I see a lot of poorly designed group work, and I think what a lost opportunity. I also see some really fantastically designed experiences, and our students tell us that those, in a way, are transformational. I open it up to others in the panel. Ian.
So, Carol, I couldn't agree more, and I think it really integrates nicely with what Kristin and Chris just spoke to. All of us talked, as you noted, about a theme about collaboration and teamwork. Mm-hmm. And I think part of this is figuring out the strategies today, if you deem it appropriate, of how do you get librarians on the team? Because I think that would be one of the key things. I've already taken a nice takeaway from Odile that I'm going to take back to around syllabus design. I love the idea of inserting a reading. I never thought about that ever. And I think the only thing that concerned me, again, it's that challenge, is if we do that, our students are going to use Google to find that citation. Maybe I shouldn't be concerned, but I think I am. And I think off of Carol's point, it's about seizing the opportunities, and I'm reflecting on a conversation that Kristin and I had a number of months ago. As Kristin noted, we're transitioning from one learning management system, if we might use that language, to another, in this case Canvas. And the typical word in technology, particularly on this, is migration, which has the implication that we're moving somewhere else. But perhaps at your other universities, when faculty move from one learning management system to another, they reinvent their pedagogy, they change the way the students learn. Maybe that happens there, but instead we have often folks asking, well, how do I move my stuff from one platform to another? So they've moved, they've migrated, but they haven't moved to a different place pedagogically. And so the way Kristin and I have talked about is that under Kristin's leadership, I think it's happening. And we're partnering with Kristin's team in that the School of Public Health isn't allowing faculty right now during the pilot phase to move to the new platform unless you're leveraging the pedagogical elements of it.
So great.
So if you want to migrate your thinking about teaching, we will let you migrate your course onto the platform. This role of being a gatekeeper sounds a little totalitarian, but it's a key idea here of the role that sometimes maybe libraries and others can think about of how we help to move forward the pedagogy, and not just be merely a support that says, okay, we'll get you those resources, but instead to teach you about how you find those resources.
Ian, who made that decision? So how did that decision, in a way, I want to use the gatekeeping notion, but
Sure.
an important one, how was that decision made? Who was involved in making that decision?
I think this came out of conversations, in a sense, when Kristin came and presented about the migration. It was really came out of a dialogue, and I left the meeting, and Kristin and I followed up, and so I made the decision along with getting affirmation from our dean that that would be our policy.
Yep.
And we'll see how the experiment works. At some point, Kristin's initiative has to move forward, so we have to move everybody to the platform. But right now, for the last year, anyone who's on the new platform, Canvas, is using some type of new pedagogical strategy.
Fantastic.
And so I bring up that analogy about conversations across the panel to a conversation Kristin and I had prior to the panel, that perhaps there's some lessons learned from what Kristin and I dialogued with and the actions we've taken as you think about the role of librarians. The other thing, if I may throw out another challenge that at least is, I think, part of where public health finds challenges in the university setting, is how you engage beyond the university, where we have a lot of international or even local partners. And how do you deal with issues of access to library resources for community members, whether they be here in Austin and Boston, or in Bangladesh. And so that's something else that we grapple with. I don't have the answers to, but I throw that out as one of the other elements as we think about who we collaborate with.
Great, thanks, Ian. I'm going to invite anybody else on the panel, if you have any final comments, because we're going to turn it back to you in a moment to have a conversation at your table. But any other comments that are burning, Stephen?
You brought up the subject matter of design
Yes.
and how you actually integrate these technologies into spaces. And we've all been heartbroken to see projects open up that have all the bells and whistles and none of the faculty know how to use it, or it's not intuitive to use and such, and it goes wasted. And so libraries can play a really great role. When I was speaking about the test kitchen, the idea that you would take spaces, mock up ideas, actually have people that would host the ideas in the teaching forums that would allow you to sort of understand what technologies you'd like to embrace, which ones you want to discard. We've done that several times, and then after 6-8 months of feedback from students, faculty, then the strongest ideas get advanced and then spread across the campus with complete buy-in.
So the idea of a pilot, in a way, around
Perfect.
space, which we oftentimes think, okay, we do the whole design phase, we then implement it, And then we discover that it's not working, right? So the whole notion of
Mock-ups,
mock-ups and pilots, fantastic. Any other final, Odile?
Yeah, I just wanted to pipe up about on both the topic of group work and then what Ian was talking about in terms of in a MOOC setting, how do you connect your students to resources that are actually available to them. Project Information Literacy did a study recently where they followed up with recent graduates and their employers to try to assess the recent graduates' information-seeking skills. And what they found is that recent college graduates do a quick internet search. They're pretty savvy about the technology. They don't do a lot of questioning of what they're finding, and they almost never pick up the phone to call an expert. And I think that kind of insight can be really useful both for group work. What a great way to amplify the effects, the positive effects of group work by incorporating some kind of forming a network of experts. The group work setting allows you to learn from others, and you can emphasize the learning from others by building in some component of it that requires going outside to get information from yet others. And again, that sort of resourcefulness, focusing on that aspect of it, and for the students who are on campus, the resourcefulness will take them probably to our library, but for students who are off campus, figuring out ways to teach that resourcefulness that transfers. If they don't have our library, maybe they have a different library, some other kind of information source.
Thank you very much. If we could give our panel a round of applause. Thank you so much. And we want to turn it over to you now. And I'm going to invite you to have a conversation at your table. If you have 4 people at your table, that's perfect. If you have 8 people at your table, I'm going to ask if you just split into 2 groups of 3 or 4 or 4 and 5, just to make for more face-to-face interaction over this next period of time. I'm going to ask you to take a few minutes right now and to share some key ideas that came out from the panel for you. Get some of those ideas out. Did you make any connections in terms of implications for your own practice? So if you could just make that personal connection as well. And then to spend a bit of time as a group, what are some questions that collectively, maybe even if you generated just 1 or 2 questions that you'd like to pose to the panel, and we'll have an opportunity to take some of those in our last period of time. So I'm going to turn it over to you for the next short period of time, and then back to the panel. Thank you so much. All right. I know that this is only a beginning conversation, but you will have the opportunity to continue it throughout the day. I'm going to invite any of the tables to generate some questions for our panel, and we'll go a little bit longer. We'll go over the next 10 minutes. But if we could start out with some questions that maybe emerged at your table, and I'll be the roaming mic here. So a group ready to start us off. Questions, and it could be a comment, an idea that you focused on in your discussion at the table. This is where we sing. Okay, Rita, you're on.
I guess I'm on.
No, never stand too close.
We had a couple of ideas. We loved the way Chris spoke about the intersection of the 2 epistemologies of curated knowledge and social interaction. And I think that's a great way to think about libraries and the future of libraries. And then my big question is, as a person in my own institution who is hired to be the glue between libraries and all the other pieces of the university, I boxed the statement, how do you get libraries on the team? I think it was Ian that said that. And I didn't hear any answers, and I'd love some tips.
So
how do you get librarians on the team?
So I had an idea that actually emerged out of just the conversation we were having while you were conversing. I opened up by saying that I was going to pander that I wanted to be a librarian, but it was really, I think one idea that I haven't seen happen in institutions that I've worked at is the idea of perhaps a library fellow from each school or fellows. Could you actually create a fellowship program within your university for faculty. So you're bringing faculty in a formal way. You're, shall we say, pandering them with a fellowship, but at the same time they're getting to meet the wonderful resources. Because I can at least speak for our public health faculty, more and more they don't actually go into the library anymore. They're using the resources online. And I think we just had our faculty retreat last week, I think, and this is not picking on public health, I think if you polled the other schools as well, be similar, but of the 120 faculty that were there, I'm going to guess that maybe 10 or 15 of them have passed through the library in the last year. Doesn't mean they don't use the library resources almost every day. But I think there needs to be a strategy to bring faculty back into the library. And perhaps when they do that, they then meet the wonderful people that are in this room, and you're more likely to be on the team. So Rita, that's just one idea that I had that came to mind, and I appreciate this, and it's something to think about.
Other ideas from the panelists. How do you get the librarians on the team?
I can share an example from the ed school that we did, and we stole this idea from FAS. So it's not really stealing; it's collaborating. That's, but any event, it came to our attention that there were multiple groups that were engaging with faculty in support of their teaching and learning and research, and we were bugging the faculty because we did this each on our own. So in academic technology, I'd reach out to someone like Dede. Chris, can we help you with your course? The research folks would come to Chris. Chris, can we as research support help you with your course? And the librarians were saying, hey, Chris, can we help you with your course? And he's like, I got to talk to 3 people. I'm a busy guy, And so, because the ed school is so nice, he took the 3 conversations, but it wasn't the best use of time, and we ended up, risking inefficiencies or redundancies or using up faculty's time that they didn't have. And we developed something, I'm sure we had a better name than this, but our code name for this was like a SWAT team that would meet with the faculty as a group, especially when they had a new course that they were designing. And so it would be somebody from my team, somebody from the library. I see Carla over there. It was often me and Carla in those conversations, along with somebody from the research methods team to meet with the faculty once. So the faculty could share their big ideas, and we all listened. We all had an awareness of the resources that came behind us. So we had one conversation, we thought about our own areas, and we thought about related areas that weren't present, and then we could follow up as needed so that we were trying to be most efficient of the faculty's valuable time and also working together as a group. And that seemed to work well. And we didn't do that, we couldn't have done that with every faculty. So we focused in on either new faculty coming to the ed school or new courses that were getting designed.
And Kristin, was there a formalized process for that? In other words, faculty wanting to engage that conversation, did they know in a way how to initiate that?
It was sort of, and I was thinking earlier with Ian's comments about at School of Public Health, there was buy-in from elsewhere. So this came out of the academic affairs team that reports into the academic dean. And so it was just part of welcome to the ed school or congratulations on designing your new course, and part of the resources that you'll be exposed to or the process that you'll go through is meeting with this group. And so if nothing came of it, it was just an hour. But usually, of course, things came from it.
But again, keeping in a way the user in mind, the faculty member, and the preciousness of time, that in a way that collaboration, you're bringing that group together as a resource team, and how fantastic. Any other ideas? How do we get the librarians at the table?
One of the things that Kristin said as she was describing the...
Odile, can I get you just a little bit louder?
Sure. One of the things that Kristin just said in passing as she was describing those group meetings was we talked about our services and the services of those who weren't present. I think that's really key. As Carol, you spoke about this in your presentation yesterday, the importance of the librarians that you embed in the Teaching and Learning Center, the candidates that you choose based on their sensitivity to and kind of interest in the mission of the university as a whole. And so I think just always keeping that in mind for librarians to be doing that might make us more likely to be included, but for all of us to do that. And some of it is thinking of others, and a lot of it is vocabulary sharing, like really trying to, we all have our specialized vocabularies and our specialized structures, how we do our work, maintaining the awareness of how the other offices work, and always keeping them in mind and bringing them into the conversation is really crucial.
So for those who weren't at the presentation yesterday, just to provide a little bit of context for Odile's comment, as a director of our Centre for Teaching Support and Innovation at the University of Toronto, we developed an intentional partnership with our libraries, 44 of them across the University of Toronto, all 3 campuses, a formalized partnership that yearly we second usually 4 librarians for 1 day a week, working with our center, and we engage in projects and work in a range of different ways. But I'll say that physical presence a day a week means that they are at the table. Any major initiatives like Course Design, Redesign Institute, they're a part of the planning of that, the design, the delivery, the debriefing, how we make it better. This is now, how many years? I think we're 4 years now into the partnership, but we're seeing huge rewards. Those individuals go back into their divisions as, I'll say, having really developed their pedagogical skills and knowledge, but also as change agents in a very different way. And we feel we have this extended family over time. So happy to talk about that more, but that's one way. We heard librarians saying, we have a hard time getting to connect with faculty, before the fact in meaningful ways. We see a lot of faculty in our center. This has been a great way of just making all of those connections. So again, I think the intentionality is important. Other questions that you have and or comments for the panel that emerged from your discussions? Okay, they're not making eye contact, which, no.
We were discussing the comments you were making around student research skills, including graduate students as well as undergraduates, and how to really develop those. And also, Ian and Kristin, what you were saying around who at the leadership, who's leading this is really key. And the example of the CIO and the vice provost for learning working together on campus is really struck home with us. So how would we have building the student research skills become a campus conversation on our campuses? So what kind of strategies would we want to use to be able to move that to that level where we can really make this happen, and not just in pockets, but across, and not just in libraries, but also in IT and museums and everywhere?
I'm looking at Odile. We had a nice conversation at dinner last night about this, and it sounds like you do a lot of teaching students, and you were sharing, you were sharing how the Harvard graduate or undergraduate comes in not interested in letting others know maybe the holes in their research acumen, and how you have to draw them out and help them learn, and there isn't room in the curriculum anymore for students to gain that knowledge, and ways that you're tackling that. And it got me to think of some things too, but through my world, but I didn't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, so what I was talking about in terms of my experience with undergrads is the importance of first establishing my credibility that I know I can grasp their topic, and then making a safe space where I'm not grading them, and I can acknowledge how hard it is to do research. So maybe that's and this is getting back to what I said in my opening remarks, but that acknowledgement that research skills are very important and time-consuming to acquire, that there is a learning curve there, and getting people on board with understanding why that learning curve is important to travel. I don't know if I'm pulling out what you were hoping for.
No, so of course I jumped to distance learning. She's talking about this, and I'm like, you could use technology to do live online or online self-paced tutorials. And then I started thinking about a project that Deb and I worked on together many years ago back at the Ed School to help incoming master's students from other countries where English isn't their first language gain skills in academic writing at Harvard. And so that idea was to go with a very specific population about a very specific challenge that was evident through the work of the year. How could we help those students to level the playing field before they got into the classroom? And so thinking about helping students gain research skills seems like I always am biased toward how can we leverage technology to help students gain anything? But when we were talking about your one by one helping students learn something, and with the additional challenge of they're not necessarily being open to reveal what they don't know.
Right. And maybe one of the most valuable things I do is go to departments and tell them how students tend to react in the face of overwhelming resources. I think there's what we see in the library, we see firsthand what that research process is really like for students. So part of it is what they don't know, part of it is how overwhelmed they feel. And I think communicating that back can be really important, and departments are very interested to hear, oh, is that really hard for them? Okay, and that allows them to kind of let it seep into their own teaching.
I'm curious, Odile, you mentioned about talking to students, finding out what they're overwhelmed with or what their process is that they use. And I'm curious in the group, do we use things like focus groups with students to ask those very questions, to get input on what are the challenges, again, from the user perspective, that we're regularly feeding that into our thinking about the actions that we might take or how we refine our processes. Do we use it as an opportunity in a way to do some research around what those issues are that our users face? And I think there's great opportunity there as well to really learn from our students beyond just a one-on-one interaction. How can we do that a bit more systematically as well? Other thoughts or ideas from the group? Thank you. Other ideas and or questions? Thank you.
My question sort of falls intersection between Ian, Kristin, and Odile about, Ian sort of talked about, the impact of sort of knowledge in terms of delivery of public health, and also sort of touched on your perceptions about how students are graduating with not necessarily the kind of base of knowledge, both in terms of discovery and data, that you feel would be ideal. And there strikes me there's a story there about the impact of not having those skills on the ability to sort of, be fully professional. And the part about, we're developing, technology sort of based course systems and how we can build that into it. In other words, connect the idea that in order to really do what you want to do in life, you need to know this, to sort of use platforms to sort of build that into the course, and then to figure out where the value that libraries have in that process sort of fits in. So curious about the integration potential.
So the question is about the integration, how we think about, in a way, finding that place where we can integrate these systems more effectively, but really focused on the kinds of skills that we want our students to develop. Thoughts from the panel?
One of the things we were talking about among ourselves was that historically the big mission of the library has been to help people find finished knowledge. And there's an architectural dimension to that, there's a technology dimension to that, and there's a human dimension to that. And these have all changed over time. But now, part of what we've been talking about today is this idea that we also help people to make meaning out of that knowledge that they find. And that meaning making is probably best done collaboratively rather than just within yourself. And there's an architectural dimension, a technological dimension, and a human dimension to that as well. So I think the interesting puzzle with the integration is there's been kind of a firewall between faculty and libraries where the faculty have said, well, the library does the knowledge finding and we do the meaning making. But in fact, the two are richly interlinked, and both sides need to be working together to accomplish both tasks.
And the opportunity in that literally the time in a way now that we have to really make inroads in that integration. Other comments from the panel?
I think it's a really important question that you ask. And I think, again, it picks up on Chris's, I think, the changing role of the library from repository and a place that you read to the earlier conversation about a place where you think about writing and you think about how you think about citation and proper citation and finding a place to do research. And perhaps having the library return to being that hub again for the type of creating of new knowledge. You know, picking up on activities that I think are probably happening on all the campuses here around incubators and innovation. You know, can you have a hacking the library, but you're using data there? Can you, as you suggested, Carol, think about creating platforms for more effective learning, collaborative learning experiences? I think positioning the library in that way, I think, again, puts the library at the center again of the university, rather than as a digital periphery that it can sometimes fall into.
Thank you so much. In the last couple minutes here, I'd like to bring it back to the panel. You've heard some questions, comments, you've heard each other. If there was a key message that you would just like to sum up with, you don't have to have one, but a key idea or message that you'd like to close with, we'd love to hear from you. And I'll take an idea from any one of you.
Well, I've written about the differences between data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. And it seems to me that ultimately what we're trying to get to is wisdom, with the other as building blocks. And I do think that the collision of these two epistemologies is where wisdom comes from. And the point is, can we create a venue across an educational institution that offers all the supports for that?
Thank you so much. Others? Stephen?
So the notion of creating a venue that would actually support that and putting the library central to the campus is absolutely where we ought to be headed.
Thank you.
One reflection I had, it just comes up, I'm biased toward thinking this way. I'm not going to use the word collaboration, I'm going to say it a different way. We need each other, you know, so I heard a lot of, from each of us, related to something that another one of us brought to the table. So Chris's remark about group work requires a space, a physical space where students to get together as a group. You know, Odile's work with the students was the first half. The second half was going to the faculty and saying, guess what I'm learning through my work with the students. Hopefully technology is the vapor throughout any engagement, but we can't do it in a vacuum. We need to be responsive and ever evolving and changing. And even the question at the back about how, you know, what happens in school helps prepare someone for life, and Chris's reflection about we work in groups as a society today, and so that should be reflected in how students are learning in school, and they should have the physical space. They should be using the technology that they'll use in life as they engage with each other. So I think a big takeaway for me reinforces a bias I came in with, but we all need each other, and we all work together. We're all part of a bigger thing, not a bunch of silos.
Thank you. Yeah.
And as a closing thought, we've all been focused on talking about ways that we can become more interoperable. And I think it's helpful to remind ourselves that if you're working with a highly interoperable system, there's always something missing. There's always something that didn't quite fit into whatever requirements or specs make it interoperable, and how can we, as we make the student's experience smoother through our different pieces of their experience, how can we teach them to always question, what am I missing here? And how can we ourselves always ask, what's missing? What didn't fit into this particular configuration?
I'm struck by the fact that it was 10 years ago this fall that a kid in his dorm room decided to create something that is used by billions. And I think if in public health, we often talk in the type of work that I do that we want to create infectious learning, since that's sort of what we do. In
a good sort of way, right?
Yes, absolutely. In the idea of a social network, can the library go viral at our campuses and beyond? Can you leverage the social networks and the social media that so much is part of our campuses today to bring people back to the library and bring people back to interacting with the so many wonderful talents that you bring to the table, to engage in the classroom, to extend research, to bring the community and the university together? I think there's a huge opportunity for the library to go viral in the 21st century.
Thank you so much. And maybe to add my own closing comment to the panel, to say that the needing each other and the importance of collaboration, that I think the days of where that could be ad hoc and let's hope it happens, and is that I think we do need to be a bit more intentional to find those pockets, but more importantly to create them. And that may take different kinds of processes, more creative ideas and approaches than the ones we've used in the past. So I think there's great opportunity to look at how we can integrate this work more powerfully. On behalf of all of us, I want to thank the panel. What a tremendous array of ideas for us to fuel the rest of the day, and we've only just begun. So I want to thank you and to the participants as well. We're going to take a break now, and Lisa, after the break,
We'll come back at 11:30 for light.
Okay, so 10-minute break, and then we'll come back at 11:30. Thank you so much.